All right.
Yeah, well, thanks everyone for joining and taking time out of your day to talk with us about data and why projects are failing. So my name is Bob Davis, and I work as a consultant with for myself called Embryonic AI, and I've been working in data science for about four years on my own, freelancing with helping with different startups, and then I was with Intel and Micron for 10 years before that, and love solving data challenges and um, hate to see them fail. So I'm excited to get your thoughts on this. And the idea behind which what I had envisioned for this time is to really have it as an ongoing conversation and discussion. And and so excited to get your guys' input and thoughts. So if you can take a minute, there's a survey link in the chat box. I should have said that sooner, but there's just a quick 2-question, 3-question Google form, just talking about like trying to get a sense of what job roles people have and what type of projects you're working on. So if you just fill that out real quick, then we'll get a sense of who's here. And of course, as we're going, feel free to like introduce yourself in the chat box if you want to, just get a chance to meet more people. Looks like we have a good group here, so take the time to do that. And I'll go ahead and share my screen. Okay. So I want to talk about why projects are failing. So I'm just going to set some context here, and then we're going to dive into using a Google Doc and each contributing our different ideas and thoughts of what problems people are facing. So here's just some recent, these are, maybe a couple of years old, but some recent articles that were published talking about how the majority of projects that are related to data are struggling to move into production and we're struggling to gain business adoption. And so, of course, Gartner, they have a lot of reports out there and they look at different trends. They're trying to predict like when are these going to deliver business outcomes. And so obviously there's a lot of reasons why projects fail, but I wanted to focus this discussion around specifically to data projects, things that, data engineering, machine learning, or different type of projects that are kind of newer than just the traditional software development. Because obviously there's a lot of things that can cause projects to fail. The question is, what is unique about, or are there any things that are unique about data projects that are causing them not to see the rewards that have been so highly acclaimed for many years now? And so to start, I figured I would share just a story from my own experience. So recently I was working on a contract project and my client wanted me to build a topic model. And so basically they wanted to take all these different documents and cluster them and summarize what they're talking about, which is an exciting problem and it's been solved numerous times. And I thought it would be, pretty straightforward to march out and tackle it. But as we went along, I went through and I built a lot of really cool technology, moving all the data. I built it on Google Cloud and moved all the data, scraped all these websites and saved it all in Google storage, and did the LEA topic model as well as a variety of other ones, and kept generating different results. And as I showed those to the client, it wasn't quite resonating with them. It wasn't exactly the topics that they were hoping to see. And we kept iterating on this way. And each week, we're consistently tackling the tasks that were needed and delivering new code and trying out new options. But one of the challenges I ran into is people, they didn't actually know what they wanted. And so when I went back and got them to do some manual classification to even move to like a semi-supervised learning approach, they were even having trouble manually classifying themselves. And so that project we ended up putting on hold because the end was not in sight, and they had limited funding and bandwidth for that. And so it was just an example of something that seemed maybe straightforward going into it, but in the end, it was a lack of clear definition of what success actually looked like. That was some of the challenges that I ran into. So I'd love to just open it up to the group. And does anyone else have an example of maybe a project that didn't go well, or maybe something that you're working on where you ran into some issues and it didn't turn out the way that was expected?
Hi, this is Ishmael. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
What's up, Ishmael?
Cool. Hey, what's up, Joe? Sorry that I've been kind of disconnected from everybody for a while. Just really busy.
No worries, man. Totally.
So, for example, a difficulty that I found recently, building a nutrition model for my company that I work for. And while presenting to like the inner IT group, I had a very hard time explaining, even though they know how to code, even though they know, they have computer science degrees and MBAs, I was not I thought my difficulty was going to be when I faced marketing and the business units themselves. But actually, it's got me by surprise that they were not understanding how accuracy worked and how, type 1 and type 2 errors working. And they basically completely disregarded 90% of the correct classification, because I say, hey, these customers are staying. My model predicted they're staying and they're staying. So, that's like, for example, like over 100,000 customers predicted that 85,000 were staying. And they're like, well, we don't care about that because that doesn't bring me money to the business. I'm like, yeah, but that's not how machine learning models work. You need to take account the whole prediction. And they just wanted to focus on, which customers leave. That I understand that part. But I guess the translation, even with technical people, I think was very difficult. And I had to go back and kind of, have a small section of statistics and, distribution and that simple stuff first for them to understand what, predictions are and accuracy is and how it's measured by models. Just the idea of that kind of shocked me, because I see, people like high in IT with coding as their function or reviewing code as their function of the business, and just surprised me, that part, I guess. But yeah, it's still an ongoing project. I was able to tune the model closer to type 1 error instead of type 2. And yep, but that's kind of one kind of challenge that I face, I guess, that translation from something that is intuitive to us to even technical business units, that it doesn't seem intuitive to them.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. That's a really good example. I've seen that as well, where the stakeholders don't understand just how statistics work. And so there's a gap there in the knowledge. So thanks for sharing. Anyone else have a story or an example that they can share?
Well, I do have an example, and it's also in the attrition space, by the way, as well, because that's typically what I find to be pretty low-hanging fruit. Oh, I'm Dave Langer, by the way. Hello, everyone.
Dave on data.
Dave on data. Yeah, that guy. So attrition is particularly interesting for not only for all the reasons that Ismail described, but also because what I found in particular that was difficult for a lot of folks is this idea that models need constant care and feeding. The things that are highly predictive, highly indicative of churn today are not necessarily going to be the things that are going to be highly indicative of churn next quarter or next year. And trying to communicate that to folks, this idea that you can't get too enamored with what the data shows right now in terms of business processes and incentives and whatever you might be doing to combat attrition. But also you need to understand that these things are going to change over time. And also, and this is often a kicker for me, which I've talked about on LinkedIn before, which is telling people, once we build the model and put it in production, you need to give us budget every year from that point forward, as long as you want the model to run in production, because they need to be retrained. You need to do new feature engineering. You need to check to make sure it's still accurate. And that's hard for a lot of folks. They kind of think this idea of like, I build a machine learning model, I put it in production, and whammo, magic happens and I never have to worry about it again. And the reality sometimes is a bitter pill for them to swallow.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Dave. That's great. That's a really good example. Very true. It's great too, I think, highlighting how those two examples both show the differences between like software engineering and data projects or data science projects, where some of the nuances are in the data and things are ever evolving.
Yeah, actually, I have an example. By the way, I'm Rama.
Hey, Rama.
I work with alternate products. So currently at our company, so we have a prediction finance forecast for the year, but because of the COVID, that thing got like completely distracted. So we had to come up with like a different forecast. And when we verified the models between, we used multiple services. One is coming from the default Azure, and the other one coming from the AWS. We picked the Azure one, and the model kind of predicted. I mean, all those model predictions are not aligning with what we have, and the prediction is completely the end users are not in a position to believe what is going to happen based on the COVID situations. So that is an anomaly and ambiguous thing.
Is this like a time series forecast?
It's a finance forecast.
Finance
how
forecast.
many we're going to make? Yeah.
Yeah. I can see that being challenging right now.
Yeah, it is. Especially this is like an unforeseen situation. Nobody knows what is happening with COVID. So.
Yep. Yeah. Interesting.
So a good example of, past performance is not predictive of future results, right?
Yeah.
Things always change. Well, thanks for sharing those examples.
If you don't mind, I kind of have one more. I do think that I wouldn't say it necessarily fails, but it increases the chance of failure. Is the fact that data science in itself is kind of a research project, and there's no guarantee that you're going to get results. So you might have a data science team, you're working together to get results, and you're keeping a product manager updated on possibilities. It's coming along, but product managers, they have to schedule roadmaps. They have to schedule engineers. They have to get their the product managers get their sprint schedule all planned out, months in advance. And all of a sudden, data science says, "Hey, we got something. We have something, and we think that customers can benefit from it." Now, product managers can either reschedule that 6-month roadmap they have, or they'll say, "Okay, that's great. We'll prioritize that, Q plus 3 quarters from now." And by then, the data science team has moved on to other things. They don't want to keep iterating on the same solution, especially if it's not going to get in front of a customer. And so there's that disconnect that, I've seen at a couple of different companies I've worked at now, that you want to find great things, but you also want to get them in a product. And how do you keep the product manager engaged in such a way that they can potentially plan for these things that might not pan out?
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That's really good. And thinking of, I saw that a lot when I was at IM Flash as well, where it's all about how quickly you can learn and how, you just don't know what's going to work. And so you just got to keep trying things and until you figure out, kind of understand the problem better and then see what's going to work. So yeah, that's great. Okay, we'll go ahead and keep moving. So basically the format I wanted to outline here to kind of facilitate discussion is first just going to provide a little bit of context of like, these are really good examples and thinking of, okay, given a hypothetical situation, what do we do? And then we'll dive in as a Word document that's shared in the chat. So you can go ahead and open that up if you want. And it's just a forum for us to like jot down ideas and kind of think through and talk about like what are the existing problems out there, and then can we talk through some strategies of how to address them. So just to set the context, kind of imagine you're working for a company and they kick off a new data project, and you have a team of talented people with the right skills to implement the machine learning model or the new data pipeline, and they're following a good methodology, right? Whether it's Scrum or it's Kanban, right? Like there's good proven principles for getting stuff done, right? So I think when we talk about things failing, you know, there's a lot of reasons why things don't work, but which ones are going to be specific to data? And so let's just, for setting the stage, pretend we have a solid project management system in place so people are executing and they're getting things done in a timely manner, and they're consistently delivering functioning software, but maybe it's not always delivering the business value. So that's kind of the context of the discussion. So if you go ahead and open up that Google Doc link.
It's in the chat.
It's in the chat window. And let's see how we did on the survey results. Good.
Is it in the Zoom chat? I'm not seeing it.
I'm gonna have to scroll up to the top. It's maybe up there.
Yeah, it's in the top discussion notes. There's a Google Doc link there.
Okay.
Oh, Google.
Yeah. So if you guys have a chance just to fill out the survey, that'd be helpful so we know which problem to work on, but we can do it in the Google Doc as well. And
apparently computers are hard for me. Would you mind dropping that same link in the Zoom chat window for us, please?
Yeah, I too don't have access to it.
Yeah, I don't see it either. There we go.
Did you do that, Joe?
Yeah, that was a doc. Yeah. Wait, no, that's a survey. I'm stupid. Never mind. I'm why data projects fail. So there you go.
So
Look at that. It's all populating in real time.
yes. Yay, stream analytics. Okay, so as people are filling out that survey, I'll open up this doc. So here's the format, and we don't have to follow this, but just the idea is to stimulate conversation. And so I figured, you know, there's a lot of different areas of data projects and initiatives, so we're just trying to focus in on one that's most relevant to people. And so, wow, looks like we're pretty spread across the board, which is great. So we can take a vote of what to go after. It looks like data engineering might be the most common, just barely. 2 people doing that. Okay, so let's start with so just to kind of just to get the conversation going. So why don't we go ahead and put a +1 by which one of these topics you want to focus on. And so the idea being is we'll choose an area of interest, since obviously like data is a big field, and then brainstorm some specific problem statements that could be like pain points or different issues that you've seen around within that particular area. So yeah, go ahead and put +1 on there for those that are able.
Sorry, like in the poll result, or where do you want that?
So you go ahead and go over to the document, the Google Doc, and just under poll results. So just right here.
Okay.
Yeah, perfect. A simple way to vote. I'll just do that for 30 seconds. Cool. I've got some extra votes in there if anyone wants to vote on that one. Okay. So we'll go ahead and go with data engineering unless anyone else wants.
It's a mad rush though. Somebody's going to trump it.
Okay. Why don't we do a tiebreaker? So if anyone else wants to vote again between data engineering and data mining, we'll just do between those two. Okay, this is your dollar. Okay. All right, we'll just do data engineering. So now, let's go ahead and I just want to write down some specific problem statements that people are running into, or even just, pain points around different projects that you've got into. So for example, like the project just gets canceled or failed. So you have a good clear vision, but like halfway through it gets stalled out. Or what are some other, just want to jot down in the problem statement section, some specific issues that you've run into, or various,
You want each person to fill out the appropriate, like problem 1 through whatever?
Yeah,
8,
you can
11,
just
okay.
put it in whatever order you want. So you can just, yeah. And if anyone wants to just talk about some of their problems, rather than after you write it down or before you write it down, feel free just to jump in and start sharing with people. Otherwise, we'll kind of go through it just to expand on some of these a little bit more. Okay, so whoever wrote up number 1.
Oh, Bob, can you share the screen for the doc so it shows up in the Zoom?
Oh, you can't see it? Oh, okay, sorry.
Yep.
Sorry, I was sharing my whole screen. Okay. All right, can you see it now?
Yes.
Yeah, so could someone talk about problem number 1? The willpower is siloed.
Yeah, that's me. It's something I see, I wouldn't say often, but it's enough that it presents, I would say, some pretty dangerous roadblocks for data projects. I would extend this and say this is a common issue in IT or any type of project really as well, really, where there might be an excited group wanting to, try and do data or digital transformation or whatever, and that willpower is siloed. It's usually siloed in a department or an executive, and either they can't get that willpower and excitement spread across either their team or wider outside of their team. And what usually results is, I would say, a lack of support, a lack of willpower and discipline to support these projects to ultimately succeed. And hence they either end up being sort of isolated pet projects, kind of like something you could look at a zoo, for example. So, but it doesn't tend to traverse the organization. So it's more pointed at and gawked at, like, yeah, a zoo or a carnival or something, like, oh, look, we're doing data over here. You can pay a quarter and go check it out. So that's what that means.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for elaborating. That's great. How about problem number 2? I think we can all resonate with this one. But does anyone want to elaborate on that one, problem number 2, data scientists doing data engineering work?
Yeah, I wrote that down. I've been seeing this debate play up on LinkedIn a bit, and I think Cassie Kozrakov, she wrote a pretty good blog on this, and she's pretty adamant that you need data engineers before you get any data scientists. And there are some people that vehemently disagree with that. I mean, saying that a data engineer isn't going to know what's possible in the data unless you have a data scientist to really explore the data and give its possibilities. So there is this kind of tension between getting the pipelines in place and getting people in place who can wrangle the data a little bit better. And 5 years ago, you know, a data scientist was kind of that big background person that might have done both. And there's been more specialization in the past couple of years. And, you know, is especially for smaller companies that are trying to venture into data. Do you need that data engineer first? Do you need the data scientist first? If you do hire a data scientist first who's not interested in starting some data engineering, and that early data engineering might be creating some basic pipelines to JSON, to CSV, or creating some ontologies, or creating mappings from one data set into your data set. And that is kind of data engineering, but it's also not big data engineering. So, and there is this tension on who do you hire first. And if you hire a data scientist and they find themselves in the first year or two doing mostly data wrangling work, are they going to stick around?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for elaborating. That's definitely very true. It's a good chicken and egg problem, like you mentioned. Okay, we probably don't have time to go through all of these, I'm realizing. So does anyone want to share, maybe just elaborate on on any of your problem statements that you wrote down that you feel like need to expand, or you feel like what you wrote is sufficient and don't feel like you need to? Any volunteers to jump in?
Yeah, I'd like to. Actually, the main problem that I see is companies are unable to cope up with the tech upgrades. So a couple of years back, we did a migration, complete data warehouse migration from the SQL Server that we were using at the time was 2008, and SSIS packages were old. We completely rewritten everything and migrated to a new good environment, and all of that tech is in SSIS. But the data volumes are growing, and the data, how you get the data into the data warehouse, all of the tech is upgrading rapidly, and the companies are reluctant to pursue that change and upgrade. If you see, most of the companies in the valley, Salt Lake Valley, are still the traditional SSIS data warehouse kind of thing. They are not migrating to like the possibilities of big data, or they are not migrating to cloud. Like the transition is happening, but the pace is very slow if you compare to the Bay Area, that kind of thing. And especially if you see, you need some vision for the data team to focus, align with the align the company. Like if you have some manager or someone who has like, okay, we got this latest tech, how can we make use of the data that our company is producing? How can we get value of the data by using the new tech and niche tech? Then that would be a good thing. But I think here in Salt Lake, many companies are not up to that point where they are not doing that kind of upgrade. That is one thing that I notice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, excellent. Yeah, it kind of ties into problem number 6, where if you, maybe it's somewhat related, but obviously 6 is broader, but just thinking of, always jumping after the new shiny object, like, oh, this new tech comes out, let's switch to that. And every 6 months, you're just switching to new technology rather than actually leveraging what you already have. And that goes for all kinds of different projects, of course. Let's go ahead and vote on these problems. And so what we're going to do is just choose one of these to talk about going forward. And so go ahead and do a +1 by the one that you want to dive deep into and talk about potential causes for this. And so we'll, basically talk about one of these problems and then dive into what the causes are and then talk through solutions and strategies. And while people are voting, if anyone else wants to elaborate on one of their problems or give a good pitch for why we should solve that one, then feel free to jump in. It's like problem number 1 is winning right now.
Well, I look at these and I think a lot of them are interrelated, to be honest with you.
It's true.
Yeah, totally.
I think Rama's point around a lot of companies don't want to upgrade to like the latest cool sauce is, and this might be a bit heretical, is actually the right architectural decision for the vast majority of companies in my experience. So few companies are actually using their traditional data warehouses to their fullest value potential as it is. Why would they want to spend the money to go to like Spark or something in the cloud? They have plenty of opportunity just using their SQL Server Kimball style data warehouse, for example, in my experience.
Yeah,
And then
I can just see that too.
And that can bleed into everything else. Do I hire a data engineer? Probably not. I got ETL developers already. I got SSIS folks. Good enough. I need someone to actually analyze the data and harvest that value. But then, to Joe's point, does my organization actually have the willpower to actually make that happen? I think there's a lot of threads that intertwine here.
It's very intertwined.
It's true.
And I think to Rama's point too. I mean, which company did you say you're at?
I'm at Alternate Products currently.
Okay, nice. Yeah, I mean, we call them dark matter companies, my business partner and I, because they're like, if you imagine dark matter, it comprises most of the known universe, and you don't see it, right? And that's like most companies in the Salt Lake Valley and like elsewhere besides the Bay Area. It's most of these companies running on-prem Windows, and they're making money, they're profitable, and that's got to be like 90%, I would say, of most companies we come across. It's pervasive. Cloud adoption is an interesting thing. Sorry, Rob, just quick aside, but cloud adoption is an interesting thing. Depending on the stats you look at, I mean, the cloud's really only penetrated 5% to 20% of IT at this point. There's still a long ways to go. Like we're still in like the baby stages. So, but hang in there though. You'll get there at some point. So, cool. Sorry, Bob.
No, that's great. It's good aside for sure.
Yeah, you bring Joe to a room, he'll talk a lot. So.
I like the dark matter thing, right? Because it's like you don't see that on the LinkedIn feed, you don't see that like in the blogosphere, right? But that's like the most companies in the world.
Yeah, come work in our sexy SSIS and on-prem SQL Server,
right? They got data centers and SQL Server DBAs. Oh God, we don't want to talk about that. No, it's not fun. That's not cool.
It's people's addiction to novelty, right? Like no one wants to talk about the here, been there, done that. Thing.
But what I see though, as an aside, is like there's a bait and switch into a lot of job postings though, where it's like, oh, we're using this, but we're thinking about moving to this other stuff. So definitely come join our team. Then of course, like they'll never actually make the move, and then you're stuck there until you're 50 or something. So
until you're 50 or something, which by the way isn't that far away from me, Joe. Thanks, appreciate that.
I'm pretty close to that too. So anyway, sorry, Bob. Go on.
That's great. So let's see if we can talk about some causes for this problem. So it looks like the number 1 problem was willpower is siloed, no widespread willpower discipline across the company or stakeholders to succeed. So go ahead and jump in for some potential causes. Yeah, it says pitch because like the idea is to, once you put it in, you can pitch why that's a cause for this problem. So let's go ahead and start talking about some of these potential causes. And feel free to keep adding more as they come to mind. But whoever did number 1, can you dive into that and explain why that is a cause for our problem?
Oh, that's fine. But I talk a lot. Let's pick somebody else.
Okay. Good. So I did number 2. So how about number 3? Or I can share mine. But, who did problem number 3?
I did.
Cause. I'm going to share why that's how that's related to the problem.
Yeah, if people are in a position to understand that like what data could do, I think they can put more resources on that, and so that data first, data driven kind of methodology that could kind of raise the willpower, but it is not from everybody. Like for example, if you take a sales team, they are not focused on how the data can help them increase the sales. They are kind of more into make more calls and improve the sales, that kind of thing. Like if they can understand like which customer to approach, which customer need to be approached at what time, and what are the possible customers, all of that information, and rely on the data driven decision making, I think their willpower, I think that is something that can help them.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. If there's not a clear understanding of the power of data, then there's not going to be a lot of willpower or motivation to actually do stuff with it.
Yeah,
that makes sense. So I'll just talk about number 2, the one I wrote. I was just thinking how oftentimes different departments are kind of playing their own game in the sense of, sales just wants to get more sales and they don't really care about anything else, and marketing just wants to get more leads, and all the other departments, they're just focused on whatever their department goals are, and they kind of sometimes, it's hard to see how what you do impacts what other teams are doing and how to work together on overall company goals. How about number 4? Who talked about data culture?
I did. I'm another that has talked a fair amount. I don't know if anybody else has any experiences want to share.
Yeah. How about number 5? Anyone who's shared on number 5?
Well, I did 5 as well. I could talk about them 2 together real quick. Data culture. What does that actually mean? Data-driven culture. I mean, so you might hear people say it's listening to the data to help drive business decisions rather than driving business decisions based on gut feel. There are different ways of collecting data, though. We got to remember data culture might mean doing interviews with customers and gathering results from that and analyzing that data. It's small data, but that is absolutely a great way of analyzing data, all the way up from, we got big data sets and we want to make decisions based on that. but who drives that? Hey, I mean, can you drive it from the bottom up approach if you got a data science team or data team that's empowered? But how far does that empowerment go, and where's that inflection point going? You know, if you got a company of 10 people, you know, the data science team can be really influential. But if you're pushing 100 or 1,000 people and your data science team is pretty small, yeah, you probably have a little bit more difficulty being influential. So who do you influence? Your manager. What if your manager is resistant? And just push that up. So, you know, getting the higher levels of the company on board, I think, is really critical in driving that data culture. Right? It needs to be driven from the bottom up. It probably has to be driven from the bottom up because you know the data well and know what it can do, but it has to be done in such a way that you can prove to the leadership of the company that this is, you know, you're providing valuable insights, and then from that point it can be more top down.
Yeah. Great. So yeah, let's go ahead and vote on those now. And if anyone has any comments too on what's been said so far, feel free to jump in and talk. But let's vote for, choose like your top 3 causes. Let's say top 2 causes. So you can vote twice. And then we'll try and come up with some strategies for those in the next last bit here.
I have a quick aside that's sort of a combination of all these things, but it's more on like pitch 5, which is the top down versus bottom up that you're just speaking about. Is how many people have like an executive level representation at that like key decision making function, or if you're where you're working so large that, you know, the appropriate director level or whatever's commensurate with company size. Because one of the issues I had is working from that bottom up approach, sort of reporting into an engineering side of things, which is okay. But as some point earlier in the conversation about engineers not quite understanding the statistical side or the probabilistic side of things, as opposed to the more deterministic side of engineering. So I'm just curious, because that was an issue, is you not only have to solve a complicated data problem, you also have to come up with a compelling and persuasive argument from a business standpoint to convince someone from the bottom up that your solution is worth taking on. So it's quite a lot of effort from my experience doing the bottom up approach. Whereas if you had someone sitting at that executive level to go, no, you know, advocating for you, giving you appropriate space to do what you need, and having that equality in terms of decision making. So that was a lot of information to unpack, but.
This is Seshmael. From my experience, I think it's like, gladly I have a combination of both. You know, it's more like I earned the trust of, you know, the executive level person by showing, hey, look at this result, you know, without much cost, just running R on a surface that took, you know, forever to train, you know. Look, we can save, you know, this, that will have an impact of, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars in our budget at the bottom line. And then they're like, okay, let's move this to the business. You know, once you can show those real numbers, those, you know, for us, you know, we talk about accuracy and like efficiencies and optimizations, but at the end of the day, you know, the business has to make money, and this is a nonprofit. And if you can relate that to like dollar figures that, you know, is going to save $1 million, is going to save $250,000, even as a best case scenario, you know, you're still going to get pitched the best case scenario. So once you have that, then, you know, for me, an executive person level can advocate for me, because it's like, hey, you know, we have this concrete base of why we're doing it. You know, we can save 10,000 customers from leaving our organization. You know, our customer acquisition cost is $200. You know, that alone is, man, $200,000. You know, or some whatever cost of acquisition is. I don't even do the math right now. I think that's $2 million. You know, like whatever it is that cost us this X amount, even if you have to hypothetically assume things, that's still showing a dollar amount or an hour save. For my understanding of the applied side, has a large impact on directors and CIOs and CEOs and stuff like that. You know, they don't care about if it has 80% accuracy or 96% accuracy. What they care at the end of the day is the dollar amount, at least from my understanding.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. That's really good. It definitely, yeah, makes it easier to sell to management when you have a clear dollar amount, and being able to come up with that can sometimes be the challenge. Let's go ahead in the last few minutes here. Looks like data illiteracy of management is a common cause for willpower being siloed. So let's tackle that one. And let's go ahead and fill out some ideas of just what do you think are some ways we can solve this problem, right? Like, what are some potential strategies to help management learn more about statistics, and even like in light of some of the other recent conversation, like how do you get management buy-in in terms of educating them about what's possible and what's not? So feel free just to go for it.
Bob, can you assist in crowdsourcing the, well, never mind, bullet points? Everyone's like typing on top of each other, it looked like.
Yeah, I'll just add some more here. I see why now. Oh, that is pretty terrible. Don't worry about the formatting. Who cares? You can just put some more down there if you want. So for the mandatory targeted training, someone want to elaborate on that one, and maybe think of what are some practical ways you could, like who's someone that would actually enforce this, and who would you have to talk to make that happen? So I don't know if someone wants, whoever wrote the mandatory targeted training.
That's me.
Okay. Yeah.
If you guys aren't familiar with my content, I'm fond of words like mandatory, especially when it comes to management. So the core idea is that so many managers have been rewarded historically, especially in large companies, through using their experience and their guts to make decisions. So you need a sufficiently high-level executive, ideally the CEO, for example, in a publicly traded company, to say, look, you know what, we're changing the culture here, people, because an adage that I'm very fond of is culture eats strategy for breakfast. So if you don't change the culture, then there's no point in implementing any sort of like data-driven strategy if the culture still doesn't care about data-driven decision-making. So this comes down from on high. And it doesn't have to be the CEO. For example, maybe it's a VP and the VP is doing it for their particular division. But the idea has to come from a certain level of authority that says, look, managers, we're going to change how we do things. We're going to change the culture here. And to help you, we're going to provide you with education. And the idea here is pretty simple, which is even if managers never sit down and craft a linear regression model, if they still learn about linear regression just at the conceptual level, no linear algebra, no matrix manipulations, none of that, just at the conceptual level, they learn a lot of things about data. For example, coefficients on a linear regression model are estimated from the data. Core idea, uncertainty. Because what you see in my experience with a lot of managers is they don't think of things in terms of uncertainty. They say, if we do X, we're going to get Y. Whereas in the data world, we're like, well, no, we have a collection of data and these things are associated, or probabilistically speaking, these are likely to happen. So this idea of uncertainty is extremely important. And then I would couple that with the next bullet, which I also wrote, which is you need to incent managers to move away from this causal thing of like we do A we get B, to actually say, look, we're going to reward you for experimentation because business is hard. Use your data, form hypotheses, explore. Even if those things don't turn out with real results, you're still going to get rewarded for the very fact that you experimented. And I think what you do is you start getting a virtuous cycle here with cultures and organizations where management say, cool, I'm not going to be punished if I experiment. And I also know the nature of data says, look, there are no absolutes in this world. So I think these two things work really, really well to help with this idea of data literacy of management.
Thanks for sharing. That's awesome.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Very well.
Now, if that can happen in the real world, 50% of the time, we'll be in a much happier place.
There you go.
I think it could. Yeah.
Yeah, one thing that one of the managers said back at Intel, which I really resonated with, is it's not what you know, but how fast you learn. And it kind of resonates with what you're saying about experimentation being like the focus, where you're setting hypotheses and learning from the data rather than just like continually to try and go for that golden egg the whole time, but you're actually understanding more and then rewarding that learning rate.
Yeah, the classic problem, for example, is if any of you have ever worked in a classic IT environment, usually you get budget A based on guaranteed promised ROI B. But in data, that's not the way it works. You have to give me the money and maybe you'll get B, and maybe not, but you have to spend the money to even find out in the first place. And people hate that. They just hate it.
And yeah. Does anyone want to touch on point number 1 real quick? Working with stakeholders to understand their incentives. And then I'll just have a couple closing thoughts and we'll call it a day so we can get out of here on time.
Oh, sorry, what was that?
Did you write number 1, Joe, again?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
I think it's just taking more of an agile approach, I think, to teaching data literacy. I almost said illiteracy. But start small. It's not like you need to, the thing I notice with data people is they also want to show how smart they are to a lot of people, including stakeholders. And it's usually the wrong approach. Like, figure out how you can help them out to understand understand the stakeholders' incentives and the actions that they need to take. Slide feedback here. And then, I would say educate in small ways. I think Dave's approach is also really good. But, give them reports, give them a taste of what data can do, and just rinse and repeat that cycle into a nice feedback loop. But it's, yeah, that's what that meant.
So I'm going to major +1 that. Yeah, don't try and show off how smart you are. That will almost always backfire. Business leaders have gotten to where they are because they've done at least some things in their career correctly. So as an analyst or an individual contributor, you got to meet them where they're at, and you've got to be able to speak the language of business, and through that build your influence.
I would also say on that note too, like study negotiation and study communication and sales. Like there's a really good book, Never Split the Difference. I highly recommend it to people. It's a book about hostage negotiation, of all things. But the approach that the author takes is, I think, really applicable to anybody who has to deal with convincing another person about something. So.
Well, thanks, guys. It's 12:30. I'm sure people are welcome to hang out for a minute if you're available, but if you need to run, feel free to jump. If anyone wants to get in touch, here's my contact info. I've been putting together some training to help teach like companies how to adopt like a data culture we're talking about, and help management understand some of the data needs and literacy. So yeah, feel free to reach out. I'd be glad to connect with all you guys on LinkedIn, and feel free to share your contact info in the chat as well, just to connect with each other. So the discussion though is really fascinating to see what solutions came out and where people were coming from. So thanks for sharing all your thoughts and advice.
Thanks, Bob. Awesome. We can leave the Zoom open too for people who want to stick around and chat after. So, yeah.
Thanks, Joe and Bob. Appreciate it.
Yeah, of course.
Gotta run.
Yeah, take care. See you guys.